Thank you for tuning in today. This is Lisa, and this is the Conquered for Me podcast, bridging the gap between abuse and addiction with real life stories and real events that are happening. And I would like to introduce today Miss Kelly Williams, who has a very heartbreaking story. This is her today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Kelly Williams is a mother, a grandmother, and she has a very heartbreaking story about a young woman who is very successful, very beautiful, and a mother herself that unfortunately left 2 children behind, and no justice, no conclusion, nothing in regards to her case on what happened, but a phone call that happened days later. And so I bring Kelly Williams today to bring Taylor's story to life, and then eventually we will talk about Taylor's Law. Kelly, as hard as this may be to talk about, I would like to let you lead here. What do you want to first say about Taylor?
My daughter, Taylor Rose Campbell Martinez, was a mother. She was a loving mother. She loved her children. She loved her family. She was a beautiful soul. We feel like she was murdered March 29th, 2024 by her ex-boyfriend. He overdosed her on fentanyl, and he gave her enough fentanyl, according to the autopsy report, to kill 4 people, from what we were told.
Wow. Hearing about an autopsy report having to determine that, and not even police being able to validate what had happened to your daughter, it definitely shakes me and other listeners who understand fentanyl. And of course, everyone knows that my podcast talks about abuse and addiction, and that fentanyl is the number 1 drug that is unfortunately taking people by the masses. So I just want to touch on what happened that day when you found out that your daughter was no longer here, being able to call her. What happened?
The last time we saw Taylor was on March 28th, 2024. I had just had major brain and spinal surgery, and she came over for dinner to check on me, and we had dinner, and she kissed me goodbye. And my husband and I received the phone call on Saturday, March the 30th at 10:15 p.m. And when I answered the phone, the medical examiner said, Are you related? Are you Kelly Williams? Are you related to Taylor Rose Martinez? And I said, yes, I am. I am her mother. And she said that Taylor had died.
Oh my God.
Of an accidental overdose, is what they were trying to call it.
So hearing that, knowing that what you had shared with me, you knew that your daughter wasn't using. You knew that, you know your daughter, you know who she was.
Right.
What is the next steps? The police, where was the accountability? But I can't because I'm not exactly in your shoes, but going on a whole year now, looking back, what was done? Was anything done?
Absolutely not. There was no investigation. There was no crime scene set up. We have body cam footage to prove that there was no investigation and no crime scene set up. The police said that he had immunity under the Good Samaritan law. He waited 11 hours to call 911. Waiting on her to die.
If anyone who is listening right now who feels triggered about any of this, please feel free to take some time and space, because this is real life. This is a real event that we are talking about. If you can relate in any way, feel free to reach out, because this is going to be a whole movement. We are going to be talking about what's next is Taylor's Law. But I just want to validate a mother who raises her child. Every mother who raises their children knows their child, and not even to be called by police, but a medical examiner to not even give any validation or clarification on what happened. Just, she is no longer here because she passed away due to what she had explained. Where is the officials? Where is the people who are supposed to, who are getting paid to protect us? Where are they? So at the end of the day, our money, our tax dollars is going to police, it's going to judges, it's going to all of this stuff that's supposed to protect society, supposed to protect our rights.
They were sworn to protect the
Yes.
community, and
Yes.
they do not do that.
How demoralized. I can't even like think of a word right now. How invalidating.
They blamed her for her death, even though we feel like it was him that did it.
Right. This is not only one person, but this is just a mother who is being brave enough, strong enough to be able to come forward. I know there is more out here. A client that I had, Johnny Siffen, it was the same thing. She died at the Remittance Crisis Center, and they waited days to reach out to family to tell her that she died, and then they claimed it as a suicide. What I want to say here is, any of you who have felt just not treated equally, not treated with any justification, no conclusion, nothing, no investigation, nothing being done, just, oh, they were an addict, or, oh, this, so what, it's over with. These people's lives matter.
Yes.
This daughter had children. Johnny had children. And many others that I've worked with in my nonprofit have children. These are mothers, these are brothers, these are daughters, these are human lives that are supposed to be having justice. Let's get into this in a little bit, but the domestic violence fatality rates and the drug overdoses increase here in the state of Colorado. So after all of that, what was your first step? What did you do to try to get some validation, some investigation? Where did you go? Who did you speak to?
We basically had to set up our own investigation. I reached out to a client that I work with in marketing. His name is Rhett Pear. He is a domestic violence client advocate in Redding, California for the Central Assistance Agency. And we took it upon ourselves to create Taylor's Law. It was just before Taylor, it was a law, that we were trying to get passed for domestic violence. And now that this happened to my daughter, it became Taylor's Law. He named it after my daughter. Taylor's Law it has some very strong stipulations, but the one thing that is the most important on Taylor's Law that we need signatures for is that we will put the perpetrators in prison.
Yes.
And that we will relocate the victim to a different state.
If anybody's listening to this, and anybody who has had this motive to just get justice, to do something, to not just for what had happened in their life or their family's life, but for people as a whole, hear this story. This mother, she's fighting, she's not giving up, she's beginning to grieve. She knows in her heart her daughter. And many other parents and many other people know what's right. And it's because I've seen it with my real eyes, and I've heard it. We've talked about this. That at the end of the day, people need to be held accountable. And it's not just the perpetrators, but it's the people that are supposed to protect. The people who wear badges, the people who are sitting up in courtrooms, the people who are investigating these bodies who have passed away. I do not think that on any means should it be a medical examiner who is not trauma-informed trained, who is not trained to be able to speak in victims' rights, who is literally just trained in a medical field to determine what happened at the time of death, should be calling a family to say what had happened. So at the end of the day, what are we doing, Colorado? Where are we going to make a change? I'm going to speak right now on the domestic violence fatalities data summary that was pulled from the statistics of 2023. So as of 2023, 64% of domestic violence and 45% of perpetrators died as a result of DV-related incidents. Now, this is just what is reported in the system because of the fact when you make a call, a 911 call, or anyone makes a call, it's labeled as DV due to the facts and the evidence. This is what they pulled from the data. This is not the ones who have not called. This is not the ones who are too scared to call, and not the ones that have been investigated. So let's look at the facts. Collateral deaths accounted for 12% of total fatalities, 3 children among 7 community members. That may not seem like a lot, but for data, that is. Because let's not forget that a lot of domestic violence victims never, hardly ever make a call. They just end up going straight to a shelter. Let's get into the children at risk. 57% of collateral victims were children of the DV couple. Evidence shows that DV fatality risks increases when custody disputes are active. And I want to touch on this and I want to highlight this because of the fact of the new bill that I'm fighting for in the family court reform is advocating for a DA and the criminal courts with domestic violence to be able to engage with the civil family courts and the district courts. Because of the fact there are so many domestic violence cases that end up having these custody disputes, that end up having children kidnapped, end up having children lost, end up having children even taking their life because of this. Because the family courts and the criminal courts do not speak to each other. So we are now putting in a bill that we are working to get to the title board along with Taylor's Law now, thanks to Imette Kelly, to be able to combine these to eliminate the reality of how many families, how many parents, how many mothers, and even fathers, because abuse is not a race, abuse is not a gender, abuse is not a culture. It is a whole epidemic. How many of these lives are being taken because we are not having officials and people who are supposed to be enforcing this, supposed to be holding these people accountable, doing their job. So let's go down to next to the court connection. 13% of DV fatalities involved active domestic violence relation court cases, and then another 7% had prior DR involvement. Protective orders were present in 36% of the fatal DV cases, but only one case had an active PO at the time of death. That, to me, if you hear those numbers and you are thinking that we don't have a problem, that's to say a piece of paper is not going to protect you, but the reality of our police, our officials, whoever it may be, they are not trained or they are at risk of losing their jobs of trying to protect these victims. If Taylor was here today, if Taylor could say anything today, what would she say to other victims that are fighting, that are just wanting peace and freedom?
She would say, don't give up. We will not be silenced.
Yes.
Fight. Fight for your family.
Yes. Yes, fight for your family. Fight for what's right, not for what conformity is, for what you fear. Because at the end of the day, these children will walk into this and it only gets worse. If nobody takes a stand, nothing will be done. Nothing will be fixed. It shouldn't have to take someone like Taylor, Gabby Petito, Shannon Watts, her children, those people to die to have a change in legislative, to have enforcement of law. Right now we have the Victims' Right Act in the state of Colorado. I would not know that one police officer that I have spoken to in the year that I've been going through my case knows what that means. I have to cite those Victims' Right Act law to them. At the end of the day, this is not slandering anybody's name. This is not trying to put shame or guilt on anybody. This is trying to bring a voice, a reason, and trying to let the other ones know, struggling in silence. The ones who are afraid, the ones who don't know what to do, the ones who are still in it, the ones who are wanting to give up, to understand that you are not alone, and this change is coming, and it's coming with a full force. In the state of Colorado right now, we're just working up to it. The state of Arizona has already issued a crisis in the family court system. They are suing and throwing officials in jail for violation and many other. You would think this is a third world country. Some of the stuff that I hear. So when I met Kelly, we need to get this story out. Also help other survivors, also help other victims that are still in it to feel heard and safe, and that they are not alone. There is also another story that's going to go with this. Her name is Johnny Siffin, and I have been working, it's been almost 2 years, but I have been working hard for justice and advocacy of this, because similar to what she went through with Taylor, she had died at the Women's Crisis Center, and she wasn't notified till days later that she had, in the autopsy report, committed suicide. But in results, she was killed by fentanyl. So I guess the question is to the community, where do you stand in this? When are we going to take a stand as our rights to be able to say enough is enough? What are we doing to make a difference, and what are we doing to enforce the safety that the next person who overdoses of fentanyl is not going to be claimed as a suicide, or because she wanted to or he wanted to, but an investigation? I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to take a breath because I know that was a lot of information, and I know that was a lot of intense topic, but let's just kind of take a breath. Let's kind of think about Taylor. Right now, there is a QR code that you guys can pull up that will talk about Taylor's law that we are going to work on enforcing more into the legislative change in the state of Colorado and all over in general. But first, we start here in Colorado where this has happened. As of right now, anybody who has anything to say, comment, feel free to reach out. Know that we are working actively to be here and fight for reform and hold people accountable who are fighting not against us, but necessarily fighting for the things that they don't really know that are hurting other people and children. So Kelly, coming back, let's kind of talk about, let's give some peace, and let's talk about some good things.
Okay.
So let's talk about Taylor. What was she like? Who is Taylor?
Taylor was the most funniest person you could ever meet. She always wanted to make people laugh. She loved her boys. She has a 12-year-old son and a 7-year-old son, and she loved them with all of her heart. She loved to dance. She loved to just joke around and play around with people. I know that she did not do this.
Yeah.
I know she didn't. I was a paramedic for 7 years, and I would have known if one of my kids was on drugs.
Yeah.
Because you can see it in their eyes and in their behavior.
Oh, 100%.
And she never, ever showed signs of being on any kind of drug.
What was Taylor's profession?
Taylor was a surgical technologist at a hospital here in Denver. And she also worked for community college in Aurora and helped teach the surgical technologist program. And she also drove for Lyft in her spare time.
What a go-getter. What a mama. Doing what she had. And she was a single mom, right?
Yes.
So let's touch on a single mom, a go-getter, beautiful woman. And we have some pictures we'll pull up. If any of you had known Taylor, if any of you can relate to Taylor's story, please look into Taylor's Law, see what it's about, stand with us, march with us, advocate for your daughters, for your daughter's daughters, and even for yourself, because this mother is taking a stand. She has not given up. I had met Kelly on Nextdoor, and I have had my nonprofit for a year now, and I have been on the verge of giving up, been on the verge of saying, I can't do this, no one else here. You know, I had a lawyer even tell me, who's been in practice for 15 years, tell me that you're going against a whole entire system. Good luck. This has fed my family and kids. That's why I do this. It's a money-making business.
You know what's so funny, Lisa? I would take that as a challenge.
Yeah. You know what's so funny? I did. So I heard that, and I got on Nextdoor, and I started posting, because I'm a writer, I'm an author, so I started posting all my content, everything. Anybody has something to say, let's do it. Like, let's see. Because we know that offenders and perpetrators who are afraid of being discovered will have something to say. They're the ones that are going to lash out. But every day I get up and I try to find survivors to victims, to anybody that has a story that has slipped through the cracks, who just hasn't been heard, because I know there's so many of them out there. I don't want Gabby Petito and Shannon Watts to be the only ones that their lives, I'm so thankful that their lives have made such a big impact but it's like they should never had to been taken. Why are we having to wait till a death? Right now, where I stand in my case, I'm still here today, but we know at the end of the day that the ones who still stand and then their perpetrators get away with it, it's only a matter of time before either their lives are taken or they're in a worse spot, or another woman's life, or a man. So this man who is out there today somewhere in this world is not being held accountable, and there was no investigation for Taylor, and there's no justice. I want you guys to take some time to collect your thoughts, reflect, and think of, if you could make a difference in this world, in your circumstances, what would you do today? And if it can be with anything that relates to this conversation or anything close to this topic that we're having, then go ahead and reach out to myself or Kelly. We'll be on the Facebook. I also have an Instagram. My podcast is on Spotify. But we're going to continue this series, because we're not going to let this go. And we're going to bring justice to this and reform, because Colorado deserves it. Victims deserve it, and families deserve it, and most importantly, children.
And we will not be silenced.
Yes,
again.
We will not be silenced again. So thank you so much for listening to the Conquered for Me podcast. My name is Lisa, the one who brought this to life. So thank you.